The first of 4 videos from the cycle, The Power of Positive Thinking. Prologue. The vessel of humanity's water. Imagine a smooth, transparent cylinder with no exit. It is filled with water at room temperature. Into it, a living creature is placed, a laboratory mouse. Instinct commands it to fight. The first few minutes are chaotic, frantic movements. It claws at the slippery walls, tries to swim, searches desperately for something to grip. This is the phase of active resistance. Then comes a turning point. The mouse goes still. Its body floats passively at the surface, and only the faintest movements of its paws keep its head above water. It ceases to struggle. This state is called immobility. Researchers interpret it as behavioral despair. A creature confronted with a hopeless situation shifts into an energy-saving mode, surrendering to its fate. This is the classic experiment known as the Porcel test, or the forced swim test. For half a century it has been used around the world to screen potential antidepressants. If an effective drug is administered, the mouse will swim longer. Chemistry overcomes despair. But now imagine another mouse. This one, before the fateful experiment, had been placed several times in a similar vessel. Each time, however, it was left a hidden way out, a tiny ramp to cling to. And each time, it was rescued. It absorbed a deep, wordless knowledge. Struggle has meaning. Salvation is possible. What happens if this mouse is placed into the very same inescapable cylinder? It swims. Not 3 to 5 minutes, but 10, 15, 20. It thrashes against the walls, dives, searches for the non-existent ramp with persistence that defies explanation. It is no stronger physiologically than the first mouse. It has no more muscle, no greater stamina. But it has something the first lacked: hope. This book is not about mice. It is about us. About how human life, with its hardships, crises, and tragedies, is that very same vessel of water. For some it is deeper, narrower, for others wider. But each of us finds ourselves in a moment when our strength wanes, when the walls feel slick and insurmountable, when the horizon offers no promise of rescue. In those moments we, like the mouse, face an existential choice: surrender in passive immobility, or keep swimming. The difference between these two states is not defined solely by external circumstances, nor only by the brain's biochemistry. It is determined by whether inside us there exists that invisible ramp, the belief that struggle is not meaningless. That an exit exists somewhere. That tomorrow can be better than today. This belief, this feeling, is hope. And as the latest research in neuroscience shows, hope is not an abstract philosophical category. It is a concrete, measurable, physiological process occurring in the brain. It is a cognitive skill that can and must be trained. In the pages of this book we will journey from sterile laboratories, where fundamental knowledge of behavior is born, to the darkest chapters of human history, where hope was the only weapon against total annihilation. We will step onto sporting arenas, where athletes prove again and again that the limits of human possibility are largely illusions, born of insufficient belief. We will examine the mechanisms of hope at the level of neurons and hormones, and discover how each of us can build our own system of escape ramps in everyday life. Chapter Conclusion. The experiment with the swimming mouse is a key. A simple, almost primitive model that with chilling precision mirrors the complex mechanisms of the human psyche. By understanding it, we begin to grasp why some people collapse under the weight of problems, while others emerge from the harshest ordeals not only unbroken but stronger. The answer lies not in strength but in hope. And here is how it works. Next part. Anatomy of hope. From neuron to behavior. The Porcel experiment. Hopelessness as a model of despair. In 1977, the French pharmacologist Roger Porcel published a study that forever changed the way antidepressant drugs were tested. Before this, new antidepressants were often discovered almost by accident, and evaluating them was a slow, expensive process. Porcelt proposed an elegant, inexpensive, and rapid method that could be carried out on rodents. The procedure was disarmingly simple, as we already touched on earlier. A mouse was placed into a cylinder of water for 15 minutes on the first day, and again for 5 minutes 24 hours later. The critical parameter was the time the animal spent immobile during that second trial. Porcelt proposed that immobility was the behavioral equivalent of despair, something akin to what humans feel in depression. What happens to the mouse in this vessel? Its behavior unfolds in distinct phases. 1. Phase of panic and active search. For the first 2 to 3 minutes, the animal swims vigorously, tries to climb the walls, and seeks escape. Every system of its body is in maximum stress mode. 2. Phase of immobility. After this burst of struggle, the mouse becomes still. It ceases purposeful movement, making only occasional motions to keep its nose above the surface. Energy expenditure drops to a minimum. Porcelt's original interpretation was that immobility represented despair. The animal, realizing the futility of its efforts, gives up. Yet subsequent research added nuance. Some scientists argued that immobility might not be capitulation at all, but rather an adaptive, rational survival strategy. In a situation with no exit, the only way to prolong survival is to conserve strength. In other words, a rational choice by an organism trapped in an irrational condition. Whichever interpretation one accepts, the test's practical impact was revolutionary. When mice were given known antidepressants beforehand, such as imipramine, their immobility time dropped dramatically. They continued to swim actively. The Porcelt test became the gold standard for the primary screening of thousands of potential compounds. It worked. But it also raised the central question: what exactly were these drugs changing? Were they eliminating despair, or merely increasing general motor activity, making the animal thrash about meaninglessly? Chapter conclusion. The answer came from modifications of the experiment, like the one we have already imagined. When a mouse had prior experience of rescue, when it had once found a ramp or a ledge, its swimming time lengthened, even without drugs. This meant that the decisive factor was not chemistry alone, but information stored in the brain. The expectation of salvation, grounded in past experience, acted as an internal antidepressant. This insight opened the door to a new understanding of hope, not as a sentimental emotion, but as a sophisticated cognitive process rooted in memory, forecasting, and risk evaluation. To grasp this process more fully, we must look inside the skull itself and watch how hope is born at the level of neurons. Next part. The neurobiology of belief. What happens in the brain of a mouse that knows? I often wonder, what does it mean to believe? Not in the religious sense, but in the simplest terms, when a living creature is convinced that somewhere ahead, rescue exists. What does it mean for a mouse in a maze to know that around the corner there may be food? And what does it mean for a human being, walking through pain and darkness, to still lift their head and whisper, "I will endure"? The answers to these questions lie not only in philosophy, but also in the very tissue of the brain. Let me show you what happens in the mind of one who believes. Blank. Blank. The dopamine pathway, the reward of expectation. Deep in the brain runs an ancient network that governs motivation and pleasure. It is called the dopamine reward pathway. Many imagine dopamine as the happiness chemical. In truth, it is not so. Dopamine is the chemistry of anticipation. It is less about the reward itself, and more about the expectation of that reward. Picture the mouse that presses a lever and receives a morsel of cheese. At that moment, dopamine surges. But more importantly, on the second attempt the surge occurs not when the cheese touches its tongue, but when it reaches for the lever. The brain learns to anticipate the reward, and it is this anticipation that fuels effort. Now imagine a person walking along the road of hardship. Life is full of pain, fear, and doubt. Yet they tell themselves, "One day, things will change. That thought activates the same dopaminergic machinery. Hope becomes the inner cheese beyond the horizon. It keeps us moving forward, even when strength is nearly gone. This is extraordinary. The brain rewards us not only for outcomes, but also for the pursuit of them. Which means that faith and hope themselves are the fuel of movement. The prefrontal cortex, mapping the future. But dopamine alone is not enough. For hope to endure, the mind must be able to construct a future. Here the prefrontal cortex takes the stage. This region governs forecasting, planning, and decision-making. It is the bridge between now and then. The more active the prefrontal cortex, the stronger one's ability to imagine that an exit lies ahead. The mouse that once found food at the end of a tunnel remembers. There is a chance there. Its brain builds a prediction. Repeat the path, and the reward may return. Humans take this even further. We can imagine futures that have never existed. We draw mental pictures. I will recover. I will build a home. I will become stronger. And those pictures become beacons. Belief is not empty illusion. It is the real work of the brain. The prefrontal cortex holding the vision of a future, and dopamine fueling the march toward it. The amygdala and the hippocampus. Fear meets memory. Yet along the path to hope, fear always stands in the way. Its seat is the amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster of neurons that reacts instantly to threat. In a maze, the mouse hears a noise and freezes. In life, a person meets failure, and the heart clenches. The amygdala whispers, danger. Beware. Turn back. If the amygdala ruled alone, none of us would move forward. But beside it works the hippocampus, the organ of memory. It stores experience. What has happened before? If the past contained victory, the hippocampus recalls it, and its voice can override the amygdala's dread. The mouse in the maze remembers, once, there was food beyond that corner. So even if fear nags, what if danger lurks? Memory reassures. I recall, it was good. Go on. Humans are the same. The memory of past success becomes an antidote to panic. Hope is not the denial of fear. It is the skill of leaning on memory to say, yes, I am afraid. But I know salvation is possible. Neuroplasticity. How hope reshapes the brain. Most astonishing of all is that hope is not only an illusion of mind, it reshapes the brain itself. This is the phenomenon of neuroplasticity. When a person again and again believes there is a way forward, and acts in line with that belief, neural pathways strengthen. The links between dopamine centers, the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus grow more robust. The brain learns. Even in hardship, I can persist. It is like a path in the forest. At first faint, but the more often one walks it, the broader and firmer it becomes. Thus resilience is built. Thus belief transforms into tangible strength. This is why psychologists say, hope can be trained. It is not just metaphor. It is the literal rewiring of the brain. Every time we choose to advance despite doubt, we lay down new roads within our neural landscape. Humans and mice. What we share, what we transcend. Returning to the mouse that knows, its knowledge is simple, instinctive. It remembers, it predicts, and it moves forward. But humans can go further. We can believe even where no direct experience exists. We can conjure meaning from nothing, build visions of futures that have never been. We can believe in the impossible, and make it real. That is our power. We are the animals in whom hope has become a survival tool sharpened into an instrument of creation. Chapter conclusion. So what happens in the brain of a mouse that knows? Dopamine drives it forward toward reward. The prefrontal cortex constructs a prediction. The amygdala frets, but the hippocampus reassures with memory. And with each successful step, neuroplasticity fortifies this circuit. And what happens in the brain of a human who hopes? The same process, multiplied by the uniquely human gift of imagining a future that does not yet exist. We are able to believe in tomorrow, even when today makes it seem impossible. And therein lies our strength. For hope is not a dream but biology, not illusion but concrete brainwork. The more often we choose to believe, the stronger we become. Next part. Learned helplessness versus learned optimism. When the dog stops trying. In the 1960s, American psychologist Martin Seligman conducted an experiment that, at first glance, seemed cruel, but it gave the world profound insight into how despair is formed. Dogs were placed in cages where electric shocks were delivered through the floor grid. Some animals could stop the pain by pressing a pedal. Others, no matter what they did, had no such control. The second group quickly learned, whatever I do, the result is the same. I have no power. Later, when these dogs were moved into a new cage with a simple escape route, just a low barrier they could easily jump over, many of them did not even try. They lay down and whimpered, accepting shock after shock. They could have escaped, but their minds were already locked inside the prison of helplessness. This phenomenon became known as learned helplessness. Humans and invisible cages. We like to think that humans are too intelligent to fall into such a trap. But life proves otherwise. A child, mocked again and again at school for mistakes, may grow up believing, I am stupid. I will never succeed. An adult, rejected repeatedly in their job search, may one day stop trying altogether. A person in depression may remain in bed, not because their body cannot move, but because their mind whispers, it's pointless. The pattern of helplessness is forged where experience repeatedly confirms, my efforts do not change the outcome. And unlike dogs, humans complicate this trap with language and generalization. One failed exam becomes, I always fail. A few broken relationships become, no one could ever love me. A narrow setback expands into a global philosophy of life. Thoughts crystallize into beliefs. Beliefs harden into habits. Habits, in time, become destiny. The psychology of despair. Learned helplessness is not only the absence of action. It is also a shift in how the world itself is perceived. A person in this state sees life as a bottomless vessel. No matter how much is poured in, it all drains away. They stop noticing opportunities, even when those opportunities are real. Like the dog who could have jumped the barrier but no longer believed in the point of jumping, they ignore escape. This creates a vicious cycle. Inaction reinforces the thought itself. I do nothing right pointing arrow, therefore nothing changes right pointing arrow, therefore I was right that it is meaningless. Round and round it goes. The turning point. The birth of a different idea. But Seligman did not stop at describing helplessness. He wanted to know, could one learn the opposite? Could optimism itself be trained? At first, this seemed strange. Wasn't optimism just an innate trait of character? Yet Seligman and his colleagues showed that attitudes toward events can, in fact, be shaped. Out of this grew a psychological toolkit that would later form the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. 3 keys to optimism. Seligman identified 3 dimensions in which pessimists and optimists explain failure. 1. Permanence. The pessimist thinks, this will last forever. The optimist counters, this is temporary. Example. I failed the exam, becomes either, I will always fail, or, today was just a bad day. 2. Pervasiveness. The pessimist generalizes, if I am bad at this, I am bad at everything. The optimist limits. I struggled with this task, but that doesn't mean I will fail at others. 3. Personalization. The pessimist blames themselves absolutely. This is my fault. I am worthless. The optimist sees context. I could have prepared better, but there were also external factors. These 3 dimensions, time, scope, and context, become filters through which we view the world. The tools of cognitive behavioral therapy. So how do we break the habit of helplessness? Cognitive behavioral therapy proposes a simple but profound practice, challenging automatic negative thoughts. 1. Notice the thought. I will never succeed. 2. Examine the evidence. Is it really never? Were there times when I did succeed? 3. Form an alternative. It didn't work today, but tomorrow I will try differently. This chain, awareness, evidence, alternative, gradually rewires the brain. Each time a person refuses to accept, it's pointless, at face value and instead questions it, they carve a new path. Neuroplasticity does the rest. Connections strengthen, habits shift. The philosophy of optimism. It is vital to understand, optimism is not wearing rose-colored glasses. It is not denial of problems. It is the decision. I allow for the possibility of a different outcome. Optimism is not belief that everything will be fine. It is belief that my actions matter. This belief shatters the cage of helplessness. For those bars are not made of iron, but of conviction. Nothing I do makes a difference. The moment a new thought appears, what if my effort does change something? The prison cracks. History as proof. If we look at the history of humanity, we see that the darkest times were survived precisely by those who refused helplessness. 1. The slave who rose in rebellion. The scientist who persisted through dozens of failed experiments. The people who, under the weight of war, said, "We shall return." All of these are examples of learned optimism. Where logic dictated, "Give up," they said, "I will try again." The modern dimension. Today, learned helplessness appears in subtler forms. Not everyone is trapped in a cage with electric shocks. But many live inside cages of words and thoughts. My vote doesn't matter. There's no point in starting my own business. I'm too old to learn. These phrases are no different from the dog refusing to jump the barrier. And just as the dog could be taught to leap, a person can be taught to think otherwise. Conclusion of the chapter. Seligman showed the world two mirrors. In one, we see the dog lying on the ground, enduring pain though escape is near. In the other, we see the human who, though stumbling a dozen times, still rises. Learned helplessness is the illness of habit. Repeated, "I cannot," ossifies into law. Learned optimism is the cure. Each new, "I will try," paves the way to freedom. Hope, meaning, optimism. These are not abstractions. They are real strategies of the brain, strategies that can be trained. And if life places us inside a cage, we must remember, sometimes the barrier exists only in the mind. I truly hope these ideas will inspire you on your own path of discovery. If you know someone who would find this perspective valuable, please share this video with them. And to make sure you don't miss what's next, subscribe and join me for the upcoming videos.